Hello, welcome to another Redeeming Truth podcast from Redeemer Bible Church. My name is Dale. I'm one of the pastors here at Redeemer. I'm joined by Pastor Kyle, who's been here for almost a year now.
Just about, yeah. Honeymoon's almost over. They're starting to figure me out, so.
It's been fun. We're going to continue our series of our core convictions here at Redeemer Bible Church, and we are on number 7, which is we serve sacrificially. So let me read what is on our website, and then we can talk a little bit about that. We always challenge ourselves to be committed contributors who do our part with our time, talents, and treasures to help others know, love, and serve Jesus. Kyle, talk a little bit about what the term sacrificial means. Maybe put that in a biblical context.
Yep. Well, first and foremost, all of our core values are aimed at accomplishing our mission, as this says, which is to help people know, love, and serve Jesus better. When we talk about accomplishing serving sacrificially, we as leaders want to be the ones who exemplify that first and foremost. We talk about that in our member interviews and in our elder covenant to our church members. We're not above and exempt from our core values. We want to exemplify those core values. And service by nature has to prioritize the needs of other people over ourselves. So even just the very nature of service is sacrificial. We look to the good of other people before we look to the good of ourselves. So a few kind of key verses that really help us understand this from the core value itself, which you can find on our website. If you start in Ephesians 4, Paul talks about the body. Right, and if we have different functions of different parts of the body and different giftings that God has given us, then each one of those is necessary to serve the rest of the body. So Ephesians 4:16, from the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. So we serve sacrificially to build others up in love, and they serve sacrificially to build us up in love. And we all it's kind of the whole all boats rise with the tide mentality. And God did that on purpose because he knows that all of us working together in that way will benefit each other greatly. When we talk about the idea of time, talents, and treasures, putting those things into practice and maximizing every resource that God has given us to be sacrificial. We want to take into account Hebrews 10:25. This is time, right? Not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Time is a resource that we will never recover. And it's unfortunately the one that we burn the most of. We're concerned. We look at our bank account, we see the number dwindling, and we're careful, and we see it grow again, we're happy. Time is just dwindling down. So as the day is drawing near, we want to be careful to use that wisely. So that's the time element. 1 Corinthians 12, if you go there, we're talking about the talents issue. We have different spiritual gifts. Paul's talking about a variety of gifts here that God empowers us to serve the body with. So however God has gifted you, those talents that God has given you, he gave you for a reason, to function in the body. You're no better or worse than anyone else. God has entrusted you with what he's entrusted you with, and that's all he's expecting out of you to be faithful with. And then finally, 2 Corinthians 8, this is the last verse on that. We talk about Paul's encouraging the church to give generously. This is treasures. God has entrusted you with finances and with resources to be generous with back in worship, first and foremost to God, and also along that lines of being sacrificial. And I could use this money for my own good. I want to use it for the good of somebody else, to the glory of God. And that's always our motivation, is to the glory of God.
That's really helpful. Thanks for that. What are some practical ways that people here at Redeemer, or if people are watching from around the country even in their own churches, what are some practical ways that they can serve and be sacrificial in the church?
Yeah, fantastic question. I think oftentimes people get confused on the nature of church and the nature of even attendance. Sometimes it's just about coming and hearing good preaching, and we can even idolize good preaching, right? I'm not going to go to a church unless there's good preaching. That's a good mark, but if that's the only thing you go to church for, then we might be worshiping preaching. Now, we want to have that as a foundation and then say, okay, church is for me to serve and contribute to. So how can I put those gifts to use? Well, depending on what church and what situation you're in, the leadership can set things up differently. What we have done here is say, okay, preaching and pastoral ministry are important, but body life in service to one another manifests itself in ways of care. So we have teams, we have opportunities to serve where you can pray on a daily basis for requests that come in from church members or from people around the world. We have opportunities to provide meals or visitation or make quilts or send cards of encouragement or perform acts of service. Just if somebody, say we have a widow in the church who has a plumbing issue in her kitchen. Instead of that being a financial burden, or instead of the church just shelling out money and saying, here, we get people in our church who are gifted just to serve in that way, to go out and say, let me love on you a little bit and just solve this little problem. It's a way of caring for somebody physically that shows them the love of Christ, because you're using your time, talents, and treasures that you could be using for yourself to take care of them instead.
That's great. That's helpful. Talk a little bit about what would be a good first step for somebody. Maybe they've been sitting on the sidelines for years. Maybe they've are new Christians and they don't even know where to begin. What would be a good first step for somebody to kind of get into this mindset of being sacrificial?
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a decision of the mind to just say, you know what, I'm going to dive in. And so in having that motivation and saying, I'm going to get involved, I need to contact the church and figure out how to, what are my avenues? So there's a couple easy ways to do that. You can do that on Sunday morning at our welcome table. Look for information, ask about the different teams. You can email the church at info@redeemeraz.org and say, I want to help, I want to be involved, here's what I'm able to do. We don't expect everybody to do everything. Some people God has just put on their hearts, I'm a good cook, I just want to provide a meal every now and again. That's wonderful. We're not asking you to cook 5 meals a day for the rest of your life, but just to be ready and be available. And so having that mindset of just saying, I want to have that drive. And then on top of that, what we would expect and hope as pastors is that you would commit to the local church. So if you're just kind of hanging out on the sidelines, maybe Redeemer, you've been coming a while and it's kind of your home, but not really. The way we envision that is we have a home and we have friends who hang out on the lawn. We have friends we're more familiar with that have come into the house, friends who have been in the house that have become house guests who spend the night. And then those house guests who get adopted into the family and now help us do the dishes and clean up after dinner. So it's kind of this assimilation process. And church, you'll hear more of that word in the coming weeks. It's the idea that we want to bring you along in the process of joining the family and taking on the responsibility that every church member has to use their time, talents, and treasures to serve the body. Because if you're a Christian that's not doing that, I would implore you to join the local body, whether it be here or somewhere else, and put those things into practice, because time is dwindling away, and we want you to maximize your return, which would be the idea of Matthew 6, Jesus saying, don't waste your time here. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't destroy. You're using the investment that God has given you now to multiply that by tenfold or hundredfold in eternity, rather than just enjoying the little benefits of it.
Yeah, that really answers the why.
Yeah.
That answers why do we want to serve? Why do we want to be others focused?
Yeah.
And why do we want to be sacrificial?
Yeah, why does God ask us to do that? Ephesians 2:7, so that in the ages to come, he might show us the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. And that's multiplied by our faithfulness to him as we serve him in this life.
It really is countercultural, right? When we live in a culture where we demand to be served, and we even tip based on the kind of service that we get. Christianity flips that on its head and says, no, you go serve. And you don't serve for any kind of earthly reward. You serve for a heavenly reward.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Redeeming Truth. We'll see you again next time.